Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. We're going to give people just a few minutes to get into the room and to join us. So you can have your patience for just a couple minutes. We're going to let people log on. Good afternoon, everybody. If you're just joining us, we're giving people just a couple minutes just to get into the room. We had over 100 people register for the session today, so we're excited to have everybody with us. We also know some people register and like to have the recording available afterwards, which we do have available, but we'll give a few more minutes just for a few more people to join us, and then we'll get started. All right, welcome everybody. We're giving people a few minutes to get into the room and to join us. I know a lot of us have spent days jumping from one webinar to the next or one Zoom call to the next. But we want to thank you all for joining us today with the Brainerd Lakes Area Community Foundation and the Brainerd Lakes Lunch and Learn, along with CommunityConnections that we have been sponsoring at CommunityGiving for the last several weeks. You know, this week has been a really incredible week, and I don't think we can have a session which is a part of our Community Connections webinar series and talk about philanthropy, which really is about the love of people, without mentioning that our hearts and minds go out to George Floyd and his family, and really every person who's ever been treated less than they should have been due to their race, gender, sexual orientation, or in any other way. What we've experienced and what we've seen has been just horrific, and our hearts go out to all the people who are impacted and affected by this. And at CommunityGiving, our mission is to engage people, connect resources, and build community. And today we are partnered with several organizations, the Initiative Foundation, Sourcewell, and the Minnesota Council on Nonprofits, that I know share our belief and hope in making communities better for everyone. And the events of the last week are just an incredible, important reminder that we have a lot of work to do. So at CommunityGiving, first and foremost, we are committed to hear and learn what we can do and focused inward on ourselves and looking at what it is that we need to do to be better as an organization. And then as an organization, we're looking outward for what we can do in the community. And today we're going to talk about how to find and keep donors. But we will be back with more of these Community Connections webinars, and we're going to be focusing on this very important topic of race and how we as a community can do better. So with that said, today's session is about finding and keeping donors, and that's very important to us to carry out good community work. And I'd like to introduce the Executive Director of the Brainerd Lakes Area Community Foundation, who's partners with many local resources in Brainerd and who really helped organize and created this session for us today. So I'd like to introduce Carl Samp. Carl.
Thank you, Steve, and welcome everybody. It's great to have you with us. And I just want to say what a pleasure it's been to work with Zach and Tammy and Warsami and his organization. And I guess one of the good things that's come out of the COVID-19 situation is how closely our organizations have worked together, and the funders up in the Brainerd Lakes area. So that's been a real blessing that's come out of it for me. Really enjoyed it that. So community giving is made up of several different community foundations. And I just want to share something we all have in common right now is that we're all doing and making response fund grants. So we all have established response fund and are making those grants. So I'm going to start with my own at Brainerd Lakes Area Community Foundation. We have so far given out about $70,000 in response grants, and we have about that same amount still in our fund to give out. So in Alexandria, where Holly is, we has also given out about 70,000 with about 90,000 remaining. In Central Minnesota Community Foundation in the Greater St. Cloud area, Carol and her group have given about 80,000 out and have over 113,000 left. In Wilmer, I don't have Sarah's latest numbers, but it's very similar to the St. Cloud area. It's a substantial amount that they've given out and have left. So Central Minnesota or Community Foundation of Carver County has given out about 27,500, and they have about 7,300 left in their fund. We also have funds in Paynesville, Rocori, Sauk Center, and then New London, Spicer, and Foley are given out through New London, Spicer through Wilmer, and Foley through the St. Cloud area. So we're all doing that kind of work. We all look at grants regularly as they come in and review them. If they come in usually on a weekly basis, if there are funds to be reviewed or applications to be reviewed, and decisions are made also very quickly with dollars usually going out the next week. Some of the funds are looking at potentially going to a recovery phase when we feel the initial needs, the immediate needs aren't met, but that's to be determined when that will happen yet. As Steve mentioned, this is a combination of the Lunch and Learn. Tammy's going to tell us a little more about that, and the Community Connections sessions, which we've been holding weekly. And you can find the entire listing of all our webinars at the website at the bottom of the page, www.communitygiving.org, COVID-19. And there you will see all of our grant funds listed that I just mentioned, the response funds, and then also the webinars that we've held. So you can listen to any of those past ones. So, and I also just want to say, given the recent happenings that have happened in Minnesota and around the country now, we'd also like to hear from you on what you think we can do as community foundations to address the current situation. So feel free to share that with any of us in your area that are on the screen right now, or myself. So looking forward to hearing that, and we also anticipate having a nonprofit survey coming out soon to find out more about the impact on your communities as it goes, as it's happened. So I'd like to turn it over now to Tammy Philippi from Sourcewell. Tammy.
Thanks, Carl. So since you had mentioned briefly about the Brainerd Lunch and Learn, I'll just quickly start with that information. So it's been a few years now since we have offered the Brainerd Lunch and Learn. It's a quarterly professional development opportunity, free of charge, and as it says, lunch and learn. We ask people to bring their own lunch, and we always meet at we usually, I should say, meet at the Brainerd Lakes Area Chamber of Commerce. It's quarterly, and we really look at what are the needs of our nonprofits, what are the kind of the hot topics of what we are hearing from our nonprofit partners. And this year we had a theme of fund development, donor development, and that is clearly why our June session is on how to find and keep our donors. We are really excited to actually partner with CommunityGiving on their weekly Community Connections opportunity. And the organizations that are involved in the Brainerd Lakes Area Lunch and Learns is the Minnesota Council of Nonprofits, the Initiative Foundation, Brainerd Lakes Area Community Foundation, and Sourcewell. So really happy to be here with all of you today. I kind of looked through the list, and I know that there's a few of you out there that I know, so welcome. And I know that there's a number of you too that are probably not familiar with Sourcewell, so I will share a little bit about that. So we serve Central Minnesota, the 5 counties of Cass, Crow Wing, Morrison, Todd, and Wadena. And we are one of 9 of the service cooperatives in Minnesota. And really what we are here to do is support and partner with our local schools, our local government, and our nonprofits. So we're able to offer different resources, such as funding opportunities. We have a small project partnership funding opportunity, which is a kind of on a rolling basis as funds allow, and that is up to $2,500 to support programming and projects. And then we have a larger funding opportunity, which we call our innovation funding opportunity, and actually we're right in the middle of this. It's an annual opportunity, which we allow up to $100,000 request. We do ask for at least 2 501c3 nonprofits to collaborate on a project. And the last 2 years, our focus has been unmet mental health needs. And this was a way that Sourcewell really wanted to move that needle on unmet mental health needs. And the last year projects that we were able to fund have been phenomenal. It's just awesome. If anybody ever wants to learn more about those, always happy to talk about that, and obviously any other programming that we can support at Sourcewell. Also internship opportunities, which is a really popular program. We are able to pay interns $12 an hour, and we again partner and contract with our member nonprofits and city and county people. And then of course, professional development. We do a lot with the Initiative Foundation, and then of course we do a lot with our Brainerd Lunch and Learns, and again, really focusing on how we can best support and move forward our nonprofits. And especially, with the COVID-19, really trying to provide applicable and timely resources and professional development. So thank you all for being part of this webinar.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much, Tammy. My name is Warsami. I'm from the Minnesota Council of Nonprofit. I serve the Central Minnesota region as a liaison between the main office and the Central Minnesota region. I also serve as a VISTA coordinator in St. Cloud, where I help host site recruit and member recruitment as well as a host site management as we expand in the region with our VISTA initiative to help out the nonprofit. MCN mission is to meet the increasing information needs of nonprofits and to convene the nonprofits to address issues facing the sector, especially around this time. We're the largest state association of nonprofit in the United States. We accomplish these missions in 5 ways: by having educational and professional development for nonprofit managers and leaders. And as the new normal now, we do everything virtually. We also have free networking events weekly, public policy education and civic engagement, as well as cost-saving product partnership and research on the nonprofit sector trends and tax, as well as budget issues. We recently, in partnership with the Federal Reserve Bank, did a national survey on nonprofits on the impact of COVID and on the work of the nonprofit section, and you can find that on our website. Otherwise, I'm new to the role, and I'm here to serve. And if I could be of any service, feel free to reach out to me, and I'll be happy to help out. Thank you very much.
I am Zach Tabbitt with the Initiative Foundation. We're based in Little Falls and cover the 14 counties of central Minnesota. Just as a reference, if you remember the little map on Warsami's slide, there were the green area on that map. We offer a variety of nonprofit programming, as you can see listed here. This lunchtime learning program, leader circles, a year-long financial resiliency program, and our Jumpstart fundraising program. We do standalone trainings. Those 3, the financial resiliency, Jumpstart, and standalone trainings, have recently been quite collaborative with Sourcewell. We've done quite a bit of work together recently in those bigger training programs that we're running. I'm also always available as a resource referral person and to provide informal technical assistance as needed. We have quarterly and innovation funding grants. We host endowment funds for nonprofits, and we have a lending team as a CDFI. In general, I like to be in touch with anybody in the nonprofit sector. My contact information is available on the slide here, and I'd love to be helpful to you if you need anything at all from us. I guess I'll introduce our first speaker next. We're going to have Mike Burton. He's currently our external relations officer here at the Initiative Foundation. He came originally from the Brainerd area, graduated from CLC as well as Concordia College in St. Paul, has had a long background in the private sector in banking and retail, as well as the nonprofit sector as the first executive director of the St. Joseph's Hospital Foundation Board, or Foundation in Brainerd. It's now the St. Joseph's Essentia Hospital Foundation. First executive director of the CRMC Charitable Fund, spent 10 years as the senior director of development for the Western US at Ducks Unlimited, and has also spent some time at community foundations in both the Brainerd and St. Cloud area. So I will kick it off to Mike.
Thanks, Zach. Pleasure to be here with everyone. And I'm sorry I don't have a PowerPoint. As I thought about it and kind of meandered through my brain, I thought, you know, maybe the best way I can shed light on our subject today is just to kind of meander through some of the lessons that I've really learned, some of them the hard way over the last 30 years in the nonprofit arena, virtually all of it focusing on fundraising to a great extent. One of the greatest things that I've learned in this journey has probably been that it definitely does vary. When you think about the beginnings of those two hospital foundations, they did not exist basically when we started them, with collective input from communities and boards of directors. And in the case of Essentia St. Joe's Foundation, it was really support and virtually a mandate from what was then the Benedictine Health System in Duluth, and St. Joe's was a member institution of that hospital group. So starting things from a beginning and identifying donors, cultivating, elevating donors, and creating program is different from a large international organization such as Ducks Unlimited, where you walk in the door and they have 1 million donors. And so we don't have a lot of those in our immediate area, but it's an example of the diversity, if you will, in size, maturity, and structure of an organization. So with that in mind, I think my comments today will think about some of the fundamentals of attracting, stewarding, and working with donors. And they basically apply to organizations of all sizes. I'm also going to try and be a little sensitive to different structures. And when I refer to different structures, I mean a situation where in a larger organization, if you have a development shop, so to speak, and that occurs often in hospitals today around the country, certainly in higher education, where the focus of that team is on fundraising. We've got small organizations and startup organizations, lots of them around our region, where the person in charge, the executive director or the creator or the volunteer, is primarily in charge of program, making things happen, delivering a service, running an organization. And then on top of that, how are we going to fund this? How are we going to make this work? So we've got a wide range of possibilities where fundraising and stewardship come to play. But with that in mind, I'll just go through some things that, while Steve Jewell refers to them as Burtonisms, I don't know how many are original, but I seem to use them when they fit. And one of them we've all heard over the years, no mission, no money, no money, no mission. And it's used in either order, depending on the discussion. But in this particular setting, I'm thinking no mission, no money. So before we start to look for donors and build a program, what are we building a program for? What is our mission? How is it being managed? What is our mission and vision? And it's become crystal clear to me over the years that having a clear mission, probably a vision that that mission would lead to, and having it all result in a very concise, short mission. You heard Steve talk about engaging community and building community, which is the long-standing Community Foundation, CommunityGiving mission statement. It all boils down, in most cases, to an elevator speech. And that initial contact that captures somebody's interest and crystallizes and clarifies what your organization is working on. Once that's developed, it's really important that staff know it, can recite it and think about it, that board members can know it and recite it and think about it. I can't tell you how many times when tough decisions come in the governance arena or in the decision-making process at a staff level, well, does it fit our mission? And the same thing occurs coming back to a startup. Mission drift can occur very early if we get drawn to something chasing money. And probably that chasing money will come up further in our discussion or comments today. So having a clear mission and being able to articulate that, whether on the startup end or on the mature end, especially if changing a direction sometime in the history of an organization. The other one that comes to mind constantly for me is few give who are not asked. And that asking situation comes in a variety of ways. And right now, I think we're experiencing a lot of turmoil in that. We're not doing as much face-to-face as we have in the past. There's more online, there's more email, there's this explosion of Zoom. It modifies a lot of the things that we've been doing, and I'm guessing we'll modify that going forward. Few give who are not asked. And it comes down to evaluating how that ask should be made, by whom, how do you initiate that conversation and get your name out there. Along with these beginning fundamentals that never go away in an organization, in my experience, it comes down to plan your work and work your plan. And again, that's different. It's far more difficult than we think on any given day. It really can vary, particularly in situations where you're the executive director and all responsibility is yours and you're up to your eyeballs. Or in a larger organization where you have a multiple person fundraising team and you can be working the plan, but there's constantly a new edict. Somebody needs to contact this person, somebody needs to do this, somebody needs to do that. And following into reactive work is one of the easiest things to do rather than proactive work. So again, it's a very important part of the process, and I'll bring it up a few more times. But finding donors, keeping donors, growing donors needs to be scheduled. It needs to be part and parcel of what the organization does, and it's not always easy to do. One of the most successful CEOs that I've ever had the privilege to work with had a strong policy in his calendar where he dedicated 4 hours a week, period, to working with donors, working with customers, donors, whatever the situation really called for there. And he really stuck with it. And the consistency and the success of having that commitment in his workday and work week was absolutely spectacular. So finding and adding donors to our work plan and to our donor base falls into that very same category. It has to be a consistent part of what we do. But in all of that, recognizing, and here's an ism that I learned maybe the hard way in my glorious years working in the southern United States, in Mississippi and Alabama and Louisiana. And it goes like this. It's difficult to remember your main objective was to work on the levee when you're waist deep in alligators. And I repeat it frequently because it's something that occurs. We have a plan, things we want to get done, and something else always gets in the way and takes us in a different direction. And oftentimes it's easier to react than again to be proactive. As we build organizations and we look for donors to create a donor base, what usually happens, and it has a role, is events. And events play a major role in a lot of ways in organizations. They can be huge fundraisers. Most instances, they aren't necessarily that, but they can be. They're a great friend raiser, donor raiser, build a list, kind of a transition process. There's no doubt about that. It's very challenging currently in this situation when you think about organizations that have been heavily dependent on events for their income. I can't tell you how many we've talked to about, well, we're not having our gala. We generally make $60,000 or $70,000 on it. We need to replace that income. It's different when somebody says we can't have our golf tournament that doesn't really make a lot of money, but it brings people together to talk about us. This is a great time to evaluate both of those structures. How do we communicate in an ongoing basis and find donors without having that big event to replace that income? The other side of it is, gee, how much time did we spend on that event that didn't make a lot of money, and we donated a big chunk of our staff time and our resources to it? How else could we be effective with those people when we didn't really raise a lot of money at that event? So I believe that a lot of evaluation of events is taking place. We're seeing a lot of creative event activity in the marketplace and across the country. The national organizations are doing online auctions. Because of my past history with Ducks Unlimited, they do normally 5,000 fundraising events a year that generate someplace between $60 and $100 million. They haven't had one since March. So there is a scramble there that's immense. The other side of that coin is they have an ongoing stewardship program communicating from the member level all the way up to the senior volunteer member in place, not necessarily to alleviate the problem of event income, but to keep the stewardship line flowing and to keep donors moving from the $25 level to the $250 level to the $1,000 a year level to the life sponsor in perpetuity level leading up to planned gifts. So that's a big time thought process that's difficult for smaller organizations to replicate, but the principles are the same. How do we communicate with our donors? How do we add them? How do we keep them moving through the process? In a more local basis, how do we add donors? In a startup organization, generally you have a very excited board of directors that want to build and grow. They're willing to suggest names. There's all of the local contacts in terms of gathering them. And this is an evaluation that can and probably should be done annually in any organization. Let's review who we have on our donor list. Do we have a database of what they've given, how to contact them? When IRA giving to nonprofits at the age 70 and a half occurred all across the nonprofit world in our country, you would be really disappointed to know how many organizations did not know the ages of their potential donors. Most didn't. A lot of them didn't have email addresses because that database wasn't updated and worked with. And it doesn't necessarily take huge software to do it. If you have a limited number of donors, it can be done with Excel or other ways, or get some assistance. So instantly, the colleges and a lot of healthcare organizations could do target marketing without having to do wide broadcast about new policies and things that were coming online. So gathering data, making it part and parcel of what we do on a daily basis, and reviewing it and looking at it. The Initiative Foundation has been around for over 30 years. 34 years now, actually. They have 11,000 names in a database. A lot of that information is not good, and we are facing that today, even in our NetSuite donor management services, because there's been not a lot of purging and updating over time for a whole plethora of reasons. And so now we face that challenge. So in addition to gathering names, knowing the community, knowing people, looking at things, there's other ways to do it. One of the isms is invite, involve, and ask. Bring people closer. Let them know what you're doing. Look for people with that passion for what you want to do. Part and parcel of all of that is identify, qualify, and ask. I can't tell you how many times people bring up, oh, why don't you apply to the Gates Foundation, or why don't you apply to Bush, or whatever. Well, what that tells me is they're thinking about money. They haven't taken the time to think about, identify, and qualify, and ask. And that applies on a small scale or on a huge scale. What fits? After all, what most giving really is accomplished through is when the head and the heart meet at the checkbook. Or today, when the head and the heart meet at the keyboard. And when the head and the heart meet at the keyboard, it darn well better be really simple, easy, and smooth to do it. It is amazing how it varies, whether it's in the retail sales world. Amazon sets the bar really high. LL Bean, people with the smoothest systems. It basically places your order for you to what some other systems that we have in place. So all of this kind of leads to simplicity and conciseness of message, getting that message to the right people through whatever means seems to fit your demographic and your ability to do it, and your resources to get it done. What do we do in this world to keep donors? Well, it really boils down to that old adage, it's easier to keep a customer, it's easier to keep a donor than to find a new one, but we still need to continue to be finding new ones. The real structure is that regular donors become larger donors. Major donors are ones that are likely to do estate plans. So any organization should really be thinking about what's the ultimate goal with donors from the very beginning, moving on through their organization. Plan giving starts day one in a lot of structures, and it all boils down to stewardship. It's all about relationships. It's all about continuing to connect with people. It's all about how we keep them thinking of us top of mind. And one thing's for sure, especially in communities, if we're not talking to our donors and clearly communicating with them, you can bet somebody else is. And so it's the conciseness, the simplicity, and the passion that keeps it connected. In good times, recognition is important. In bad times, personal connection is important on how we maintain these relationships. And it's different for different people, but I'll tell you what, people still like to be talked to clearly on the telephone. Through all of this, in replacing personal visits, I've taken to the phone constantly, or Zoom or video when possible. And it's really more of a check in and catch up, sincerely wondering how these folks are doing in their lives or in their businesses, asking questions and listening more than talking. Perhaps sharing an update about our organizations, what we're doing, how we're preparing for the future beyond this, how we're dealing with it today. You heard about the responses from the Community Foundation and the funds. And then perhaps asking permission to ask, is this a good time to talk about support, or should we visit this at a later time? And always send a thank you. And in some cases, make it easy for them, send them a return envelope if they're not an online donor. So it's a constant process. Stewardship never ends. And in the larger organizations, we're seeing a real resurgence in the wealth engines. Econometrics, Stelter in Des Moines runs donor lists for contributions and wealth and kinds of things they give to. Robert Sharp in Memphis does it. The Chronicle of Philanthropy just published an article, and it should be accessible by most people, winning ideas in online fundraising, and there's probably a new world in that. But even in the smaller organizations, constantly reassessing that stewardship. Raise the bar. Talk to your donors because somebody else is. That's a lot of information covering 30 years of experiences. And I think I'll wrap it up there and just kind of close with a quote that struck me in one of my readings in recent times. It's from Kara Gauscher. She's an Olympic runner, pretty successful, dedicated lady. Acknowledge your small victories. They will eventually lead to something great. And the small victories in doing stewardship right, when that day comes, if you stay in this field and you get a phone call about a planned gift or a very large gift or other successes you can bring your organization, you'll know that feeling. So thanks, everybody. Peace and success going through all this struggle.
Thank you, Mike. We appreciate that feedback and information. So, and thanks for laying the groundwork in Brainerd for me too. Appreciate that. So, sounded like you might have had one of your duck hunting arcade games in the background at your place there. I don't know where that little music was coming in from, but I'm going to turn it over next to Tim Bergen. Tim is treasurer on my board of directors. Been on our board for about 6 years now. He's a fund holder and also actively involved in some other nonprofit organizations. And I wish for all of you to have a board member as dedicated, talented, and committed as Tim is to mine. So I really appreciate everything he does and his willingness to come in and share some of his perspective as a donor with the rest of you. So Tim, I'll just say Tim is retired CPA and partner at CLA, Clifton Larson Allen, out of the Brainerd office. So welcome, Tim. Thank you.
Thank you, Carl. A big thank you to the 4 organizations that are sponsoring here. We're very fortunate to have the resources for nonprofits in this area. Probably most importantly, thank you to those nonprofits out there that have joined us for the work that you do. It's nothing short of spectacular, and it makes it much more beneficial for us as donors. When Carl asked Ann and I to participate, I immediately said yes, but she does not like to call attention to herself as a donor, so she's not joining us here today, but I did get her input. What we're discussing here, none of it is really new to you, but hopefully reinforces what you already know and what you do. A little bit of background. Ann and I have both been involved in several nonprofits, serving on boards and volunteering and supporting organizations financially. We come from very modest backgrounds. Our families didn't have a lot of financial resources, but our parents still gave a lot through services. And that's transpired through us. And now our children are very involved in both nonprofit boards and volunteering. Why do we donate to causes? There's several reasons I can outline, but the fundamental reason for us is having a personal connection to the nonprofit's cause. And how does that really happen? Well, we like to be part of the organization that we feel good about, and this happens for us over time. For us, we've often volunteered for the organization or been part of the board. And like Mike said earlier, once you do that, you learn how to support it, and you learn what the organization really needs. For us, this leads to engagement and living out the mission with you. We give because it feels good at that point. For other donors, it may be a situation where it's personal to them, whether they've actually experienced the need or if they know somebody that has benefited from the organization. We've been very fortunate not to probably experience the need, but see how others do it. A personal example of that for us is the Sharing Bread Soup Kitchen. My wife Ann's been on the board for, seems like forever now, and through a variety of roles. If you know the organization at all, they serve, or up until this COVID situation, they had served a meal every night, and done that through 35 different volunteer groups who pick the same day of each week for each month, so they can count on it, they can rely on it. Organizations such as churches, social clubs, service clubs, organizations, or a group of friends all participate. But these people have very strong feelings about the organization. They kind of make up the backbone of the donors. It's interesting, they give regularly. Many of them give monthly, but it's a very small amount, but you can count on it. It becomes regular and routine. We give annually or when there's more of a need. But these volunteer donors have become incredible advocates for their cause, and they are spreading the word by talking about it with people that they associate with, or much more on social media these days. Once we develop a personal connection, this leads to feeling associated with the organization. It becomes like we belong as members. It's like a partnership being fully vested in your success. And when we're connected, we're very comfortable being go-to members. When there's a real financial need or operational needs, people like us like to be depended upon. And once you're a member, you understand, expect, and like Mike talked about earlier, you kind of embrace capital campaigns and large projects and participate. Just don't ask us too many times for capital campaigns or too often. Examples there are church members and organizations where we're active, like Rotary or the Essentia Foundation. We like organizations, as Mike talked about earlier, being mission driven, and in our case, connected to the community. Thus we have a desire to give back to the community that benefited our family. But the organization has to have a mission that we believe in. Several that have benefited our family and children we support. There's a tremendous need locally here in Brainerd, as we all know, due to the wealth diversity and disparity in our area. But many times we get a feeling of pleasure and reward to give, and it feels really good to be thanked. Personal recognition feels good for many, and certainly not all. The type A personalities, I think it's good to offer that levels of recognition for giving. It's kind of like an incentive to increase to the next level. Some may prefer to be anonymous, and that's great. organizations that their families benefited from, children been involved with, or Mount Ski Gull and the YMCA. For Ann and I, Brainerd Community Foundation, We Are Clinic. If you move on to the next slide, we like to see the impact locally versus a national organization. We'll give to both, but we give higher levels locally. It's important that the nonprofit communicate local impact and outcomes. We're more likely to give if we can see and hear the impact. I would suggest you be very specific to your donors or what their gifts support. More information about your accomplishments is better than less. I would overdo it versus underdo it. And educating your donors on methods of giving. Mike talked about that a little bit earlier too, is understand the resources that these sponsors have here and create lists of how to give and using foundations. This is probably obvious to all of you, but obviously trust of the organization. We understand how the staff and board have to work together, and based upon our experience, we know how difficult that can be. But if we trust, we're confident that good decisions are being made, and we understand that. We have cut back or discontinued donations whenever we've lost confidence. Really important, do what you say you're going to do, or explain not why not, and be clear on that. And if there's a good reason, we're fine with that. Be transparent and dependable. Heredity and family tradition, probably not heredity, but much passes on through personal examples. Parents and children, like I mentioned earlier, are very unselfish in giving. But what helps us is if the organization can try to involve families and give children an opportunity to be involved in services and or fundraisers. A good example for us is when we were in the Twin Cities. We went to a small church and we volunteered to drive developmentally disabled residents to church and teach Sunday school. And we brought our kids with, even though it kind of made the cars a little bit more packed. But our kids got exposure and understood, these people and became more sympathetic and tolerant. So we always felt strongly about that. Online and social media, we started to participate more in the online options. I was hesitant at first, but now it's so prevalent. It's a great way to address current trending issues that are important to the donor, and using that media and sharing of a consistent message. Our friends and coworkers influence us certainly that way, and it's a way to share information that we believe is important. I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the tax benefit areas, but I won't get very deep here. Obviously, with my background, it's easy to understand the benefits of charitable deductions, and that had a big impact on us initially. I was probably less likely to give than my wife was, but over time, it's just helped us understand what's needed. Again, there's many alternatives to giving that organizations need to alert donors to. In this low interest rate environment, I think the community foundations have talked about how to utilize that to your benefit using tools such as charitable annuities and those types of things. Example that we've used significantly is a donor advised fund, and we're using that will carry over to the next generation, a great tool for our kids to consider. We funded it for several years and now we're using it more significantly. Came as a result of a meeting with a professional advisor, and so having relationships with professional advisors I think is great for the charitable organizations. I'm not sure company matching funds is used a lot these days. It was something that we took advantage of of years ago and we're encouraged to use. Even with the tax law changes and the trending items, I think donations is still primarily an altruistic behavior. So what you do as nonprofits is still the most important concept here, and I think that's what we look at. I'll stop there so that we allow time for questions.
Well, thank you to all of our presenters. We really appreciate your time and expertise today. We do have a couple of questions that have been messaged in to us. So I will start the first one for Tim. And Tim and Mike, if you have something you'd like to contribute, that would be great too. Can you speak a little bit from your unique perspective as a board member about the role of boards in donor identification, retention, and in stewarding?
Great. Yes, being on several different boards, I think the board has a lot of responsibility, if not more responsibility than the leader or the directors. As part of the Community Foundation, I think many know that you're the people that are probably connected to the individuals that you know have the resources as well as may have the strong interest, and so I think that board responsibility is high.
Mike, anything you'd like to share regarding your experience of the role of boards and how staff leadership can use those boards effectively or partner with those boards effectively? All right, we may have.
I don't see Mike on the lineup right now, Sarah.
Okay, we may have had a little technical glitch then. All right, let's keep going. I guess here is a question to maybe Tim and some of my colleagues from CommunityGiving that we might want to answer. And that is, nonprofits are struggling a little bit right now with how to message. Should they lead with stories of hope? Should they lead with the statement of need? What seems to resonate most with donors? So while I realize that's a purely personal question to you, Tim, from your experience over the years and in this particular time frame, what would you offer to those nonprofits as direction or advice?
Great question. I think either one of them is probably a great way to go. I could see, personally, I would look for the need first is what would attract me. But certainly in these times, this week, on top of everything else, hope is probably a critical concept as well. I know at our community foundation, we talk about both as opportunities, and I think you can attract probably different donors for each reason.
And Sarah, I'll just share what I've seen in research as to what makes people give. I think it was Carnegie Mellon University out of Pittsburgh did a study and found that, and they used hunger in Africa as the model, when they gave all the horrible statistics about hunger and people dying of starvation, et cetera, versus the story of one young boy, Kofi. When you told the personal story of the impact on this person, one person, the people who made funding decisions gave 7-to-1 to the personal story versus statistics. So I think telling those impact stories on individuals is a really important strategy.
I would offer that same advice from our experience in the Wilmer Area Community Foundation, in that every time we can tell the donor specifically what their dollars have been able to make possible in our community, or how donors collectively have met a need. That has resulted not only in a lot of the feel-good messaging that Tim was talking about and them understanding the mission and how they are a part of the mission, but it has raised the level of awareness of our work generally and increased their likelihood to choose to come alongside us with a gift the next time we ask. So I do think it is a tricky balance right now, but my sense is we won't ever go wrong with sharing the actual need, especially locally, in as personal a way as we possibly can. All right, well, the next question is one that I think I'd like to open to some of our sponsors of today's organization or webinar. So Tammy or Zach or Warsami, you are welcome to answer this question as well. So in light of everything that has been transpiring in our state in the last 7 days, are you aware of attempts in local communities, particularly across Greater Minnesota, to address the issues of institutional racism and related issues of sexism and patriarchy and wealth disparities or capitalism that you would want to point any of our participants today toward, or to watch, or to participate in?
Hi, Sarah. As for Minnesota Council of Nonprofit, our role is to provide information to the nonprofit sector and the community. And as we're all working together to figure out the best role our organization can play, we're also working to shift power as much as possible to the community's impact by the recent events, and then leading to the recovery and also the reform work. I can post a link of resources that we are working on right now in the chat. Oh, actually, hold on, let me just post it to everybody. And so it's still kind of ongoing, but if anybody wanted to figure out a way that they can help out, I just posted a link in the chat of the resources that we're currently working on. And it's an ongoing thing. I believe on Thursday, there's going to be a memorial at North Central University. And at this point, we're working on healing and rebuilding the community, especially in Minneapolis.
Thank you. Anyone else have anything they'd like to share?
I'll just add, the Brainerd area has a welcoming communities group that's Region 5 has helped organize. And I assume we have a meeting coming up on June 18th, and I got a feeling this is going to be a primary topic of what we're going to talk about. So if anybody from the Lakes area is interested in joining that discussion, please let me know.
From the Wilmer area, I would also offer that our community grassroots planning initiative called Vision 2040 has had for the last 2 years an inclusion and engagement focus area. And yesterday we had a deep conversation about how to start, I'll be candid, some uncomfortable conversations in the Wilmer area to help people start to get into the space and to understand institutional and systemic racism and what parts we all can work on and what parts we need to own in that conversation. I don't anticipate those conversations will move enormously quickly, but I do think it's important for us to make space in our communities for those conversations. And I suspect that my colleague, Carol Turnow for the Central Minnesota Community Foundation would also want to share just a little bit about some of their work around these same kinds of conversations.
Yeah, actually, thank you, Sarah. I was thinking more about conversations that we've had with foundations, both at the Minnesota Council on Foundation level and our local foundations. As we look at grant applications and who we fund, you know, there's been more interest in DEI in the past few years, for sure, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And the experiences with COVID has really brought forward the fact that there are huge inequities for people of color. And then this last week's events has thoroughly brought out, the need for change. And so I expect that you can expect that foundations are going to be looking to nonprofits to say, how are you addressing these kinds of things? If you are able to help with this, we all should be getting on the boat for that. For Central Minnesota Community Foundation, we definitely are exploring what are things that we can do as a foundation, both in the role of a grantor, but also as a convener, because it's upon all of us to make our communities a better place to be.
Thank you, everyone. That wraps up the formal portion of the question and answers for today. So I will turn it back over for wrap-up comments.
Well, thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Mike and Tim, and all of our partners, Warsami and Tammy, and I'm trying to make sure I got everybody. I don't have everybody's name right in front of me, but we want to really say thank you for this partnership and coming together to share. We appreciate you sharing your stories. There's challenging times with COVID and the issue of race. We need to be looking, as I mentioned earlier, also internally, just each of ourselves, looking at ourselves and then add our own organizations. And as you heard with some of the foundations we work with at CommunityGiving, we're doing just that. So we would like to invite you to come back next week. We'll be back with CommunityConnections at the 2 o'clock time frame. And at that time, we'll be talking about innovation in the arts. Many of the arts organizations are very challenged right now. And so we are excited to share some hope and some great ideas that some arts organizations are doing. So join us next week at 2 o'clock. And we invite your feedback and comments. Email us at info@communitygiving.org or check out our resources and other webinars at communitygiving.org/COVID-19. And we want to just thank you for the great work that you're doing on the front lines in all of our communities. It's incredible, the stories that are out there of the nonprofits on the front lines doing the great work that you're doing. And we appreciate all that you're doing and appreciate you connecting with us in this format that we're doing here on a weekly basis. So once again, thank you to the Initiative Foundation and Sourcewell and the Minnesota Council on Nonprofits for this wonderful partnership, and in particular, Carl Samp and the Brainerd Lakes Community Foundation for organizing this. Thank you, and we hope to see you next week.
Thanks, Zach.